All right, people, we're back. New week. We had our little hiatus. We talked some announcements. We hyped up the year, and now we're back, Luke. The season 2 premiere of Talkin' Lost, Man of Science, Man of Faith. Another crucially important episode within the canon
I think
of
you've said that
Lost.
every single episode, to be
Yeah, I
honest.
know I did, and that was season 1. But here's the thing, right? So here's the difference between season 1 and now for the rest of the show. Season 1 was the setup. We got to know these characters. Yeah, they were on the island. Yeah, we got our little bits, our little hints, our little inserts of the lost lore at various points. But now we're getting serious. You know, we have blown open the lid of the hatch, if you will. The survivors are starting to descend. We're starting to meet some new characters. They're seriously debating, okay, were the events that we witnessed in the last season even real? And oh, it is only getting started. Like Zendaya said at the end of the first Dune, this is just the beginning. Luke, are you ready to dive fully in?
I'm more than ready.
Yes.
I feel like this is the actual show that they wanted to make, and they just had to get there.
Yes.
Get the main audience so that they can do what they really want to do.
Yes, indeed. All of that and more on today's season 2 premiere of Talkin' Lost, Man of Science, Man of Faith. See you guys shortly. All right, Luke, Man of Science, Man of Faith. Last time we saw our survivors was Jack and Locke had just successfully blown off the lid of the hatch with the dynamite from the black rock after Hurley saw the numbers etched on the lid and told them not to. Meanwhile, Charlie and Saeed managed to successfully get baby Aaron back to Claire at the caves after discovering Russo's deception. No word or mention of anybody on the raft after what happened last season. This is also the beginning of a storytelling trend that Lost would inspire a lot of other shows to do, where they would take kind of the dual storylines that were set up from the previous season and examine them across separate episodes. So this premiere, we pretty much only exclusively follow the people on the island, everything going on with the hatch and at the caves. And the next episode, Adrift, we will follow what's going on, resume, I should say, what's going on with Michael, Jin, and Sawyer on the raft. So the opening scene, of course, it should be expected that we pick up with meeting an entirely new character who I know, who you have not met yet. I was mistaken. I thought that we were introduced to this character in the finale of season 1. I was wrong. Of the new characters that we get in season 2, it was Ana Lucia, who is one of the tail end survivors who we'll meet in a couple episodes, that Jack meets in the airport in the finale of season 1. I had forgotten that his encounter in the flashback with Desmond was in this episode in order to set up Desmond's introduction in this episode. Like I said, the one Desmond Henry Hume. The opening scene follows him. He is revealed to have been living inside the hatch. We see an opening montage of him getting ready for the day up until the explosion goes off before we follow a tracking shot that leads up to the shot from the end of season 1, Jack and Locke looking down the hatch. So automatically the show was setting us up to be like, okay, like knowing all the survivors in season 1, and now we're going to start to examine more of the island. And this season is definitely the beginning of it. Like I said, this is referred to as collectively as the hatch season for a reason. But once again, continuing what Lost does so well, you know, making sure that they deliberately insert a new detail, a new piece of lore in each episode, not trying to give it to us all at once. And automatically, like, well, what were your thoughts after watching the first opening sequence? You're like, who is this guy? What the hell is going on? Is this supposed to be inside the hatch? Like, because Lost had was very, very good at like displaying seemingly normal looking events before revealing at the last minute how they were connected to the island.
Yeah, I was thinking, okay, this is either a flashback of someone we haven't met yet, or it is under the hatch. And then when the explosion sets off, it's like instantly clicks like, okay, this is right after the previous episode. So yeah, like he's typing something in a computer. He's getting ready. He's injecting himself with something. I guess we may find out more about that. But then, of course, it's like, hey, remember that thing from the last one? This is the other POV of that same event. That's something I love, just seeing the same event from different POVs and how that kind of strengthens that moment and makes it more memorable.
Yes, it's funny because I'm writing a script now, actually, not to toot my own horn. I know we're here to talk about Lost, but uh I've been writing a script for the first time in several years, and I'm noticing a lot of Lost seeping its way into it, even though again, it's like it was one of those things where I'm like, oh man, I'm having fun with this one event. But I need to introduce these other characters. Let's do the same event, but from the other character's POV. And I did not even realizing that I'm getting that Lost, because Lost
Great
was
writers steal.
yeah,
Like
exactly. Exactly. Well, no. Great writers pay homage. Bad writers steal. That's the rule if we're gonna get it
I've
right.
heard it many different
It
ways
works either way.
from many different authors.
It works either way. There's no like one set stance for it. But yeah, so obviously again we have the survivors deliberating over it. Jack of course is like, yeah, that thing is like 40, 50 feet down, there's no way we're gonna get everybody down there all at once. And Locke is like, man, don't you really want to see what's going on there? So that's the other piece obviously of this that's established, is once again this episode is called Man of Science, Man of Faith. That phrase was kind of hinted at all throughout season 1, and now we're finally here, we're finally getting to it. That's another kind of essentially crucial piece of Lost lore going forward that really follows us for the next couple of seasons, is really the divide between Jack and Locke. Jack really trying to examine everything from a practical standpoint, trying to potentially, because he is very weary of any supernatural things that may be happening, whereas Locke is just all in on it, fully embracing it, fully understanding, okay, this island is more than the practical stuff that we have been witnessing up until this point. And he is just fully in, to the point where he is kind of willing to, basically admitting to that he's willing to like sacrifice, other people for it. And of course, we're going to see kind of the repercussions, the ripple effects of this, if you will, over the course of the next couple of seasons. And you also kind of, see the two compatriots that went with them, Kate and Hurley, also kind of reflectively, buying into them and getting more into their backstories, where you have Kate asking Locke about why he wants to go into the hatch so badly, and Locke of course doing his usual Lockness, where he retorts and is like, well, he's like, yeah, I probably am crazy, but you saw that column of black smoke that tried to drag me into that hole, so I guess you're crazy too. Once she admits it, she's like, yeah, I saw that. And then Hurley telling Jack the story about the numbers and how he met them, and of course Jack being like, Jack's only reason I love this, because literally it was, again, the memories were kind of coming back to me of the first time that I watched this. And the funny thing is, Hurley tells Jack basically the entirety of his backstory in kind of one sitting, where he's like, yeah, I was in a mental asylum and I met this guy Leonard, and the whole time he kept saying the numbers. And then one time I was out, buying, something, and the numbers were going through my head. And I'm like, oh, okay, what if I played them for the lottery and I won $114 million? But that's when all the bad stuff happened. And the only thing that Jack takes away from that whole thing is you were in a mental asylum. And he's like, dude, like, that's Hurley taking, like, another classic Hurley line. It's just hysterical. Yeah, but then there was a thing of where it's like Jack also, it's like, it's not that I don't believe you, Hurley, but there's no way to kind of prove anything that's going on ultimately. And I don't know, I felt like that was a little bit disregardful of Jack. Like, even with Jack staunchly needing to believe in something practical, almost to the point where he feels like he's being stubborn for the sake of being stubborn. That's another thing, too, also that you're going to see, is that the first season did such a good job of setting up all the characters, but really Jack and Locke, respectively, that, what's it called? That now when it gets to, we're gonna, so season 2 is what I like to call like the flaw season, where you start to get into some of the characters like doing some things and playing into their weaknesses, if you will, almost to a fault, where you see Jack kind of almost refusing to believe something even though it's blatantly in front of his eyes, because it's like, oh, that can't be, there's no logical explanation for that, which kind of puts more of the favor and more of the, which kind of puts the survivors more in Locke's camp, until Locke does something just so batshit and off the deep end that people are like, oh, well, we kind of are forced to go back to Jack. So that's another reason why kind of this title is so symbolic, besides kind of what's been set up about those two characters, is the fact of, now that we've been on this island long enough, we've spent enough time with these characters, we're kind of getting into the respective of both extremes, if you will. What happens when you go too rational versus what happens when you go a little bit too mythical, a little bit too fantastical, if you will. What do you think of so far? Just walk me through your thoughts of like the characters' interaction so far, like post the hatch, and maybe like whose side you're wondering is right, quote unquote.
Yeah, I think you're right. It is like there's a good middle that they should be exploring, but for the sake of keeping the show entertaining, you need characters on the extreme ends, as you said. And yeah, that Jack the interaction with Hurley, I was like, you didn't even like slightly acknowledge the numbers. Like, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a small moment. And of course, Locke, I'm sure he's going to be assembling his disciples, if you will, from the rest of the survivors, as will Jack, trying to keep everyone, logically thinking and whatnot. So I think it's going to be a great dynamic to
Well,
explore as they descend.
yeah. Well, the other thing too also is that like even with Jack, being trying to be as rational as he can, being like, look, there's no way that the ladder's broken. There's no way that we can get everybody down into the hatch at a time. Just for him to be completely disregardful of Hurley's story, even though he can go back. They see the numbers etched into the hatch. As rational and as skeptical as you would have to be, that's a pretty fucking big coincidence to see that exact set of numbers sketched on the side of it, or at least I would be. So we follow them back to the caves. Jack tells everybody. There's also a subplot about Shannon looking for Vincent. Of course, feeling guilty because Vincent's run off into the jungle. And she's like, oh, that's the only thing anybody ever asked me to do. She runs off in the jungle. Saeed follows her. And this is our first instance of Shannon seeing a vision of a dripping wet Walt babbling in some unknown language. Now, will the storyline actually go somewhere? Or is this kind of just another one of Lost's many infamous red herrings that's just setting up for a character to exit us abruptly, if you will? We shall see. But like I said, this episode is mostly focused on the hatch and the survivors' immediate reaction to it. Jack comes back. He tells everybody that, like, look, we found the hatch, but it's too deep to go into. We can't really figure, we don't really know what's inside. The outside said quarantine. So we should probably just stay here. And everyone's like, well, what about the others? And of course, Charlie, after the events of last episode, is immediately skeptical and is like, there are no others. Russo was lying, So that, of course, raises the question of, oh, were the others real or not? But then, of course, although I find
There
it
was
odd.
there was an Ethan scenario.
Yeah,
So
exactly. I'm like, wait, Charlie, did you seem to
did
forget
you
the
forget
dude who
about that?
strung you up and hung you? So that's kind of a little bit of a question mark for me, if you will. And then, of course, Locke comes up and is like, Jack, you're right. It's probably really stupid for us to descend into the hatch. There's no logical reasoning for it. So we probably all should wait here, but I'm tired of waiting and I'm going in. So he gets a bunch of cables and goes to the hatch. Kate follows him. And finally, after a while, Jack is kind of forced to go with them. He's like, all right, screw this. We got to go. We got to do this. So they follow Locke and Kate. First, Locke lowers Kate down. What's it called? Things seem to be going well. And then, of course, they're not, because things never go well in these scenarios. The mysterious light that went off when Locke was banging on the hatch after Boone was originally injured goes off. Kate is sucked in against Locke's will. Locke goes in himself, ties the rope to a tree. Jack follows them. And this is where I want to take a break from the main storyline, because obviously this is where kind of the flashback aligns, and dive into the flashbacks in this episode, where we're continuing into another Jack backstory. And it's funny because it's a little bit of a this is where so what I say about the flashbacks going forward is that the season 1 flashbacks were, I would say, the most essential ones in terms of dictating how they directly got to the island. And now that we know how they pretty much all got to the island, as far as the events that put them on the plane that got them to the island, now this season we're going to be getting into more of kind of filling in the pieces of their life, of their backstory, where the interesting thing is we got 3 Jack flashback episodes last season, but really only 2 of them, I would say, tied directly to how he got to the island, to the plane and on the island. The third one obviously was kind of just meant to complement his stress out time in order to try and save Boone by showing his wedding to Sarah, played in a show by Julie Bowen, Claire Dunphy. So now we're getting kind of like more of the pieces in order to fill in some of the context and backstory, some of the pieces that we were maybe missing from their story, because we still don't know how Locke was paralyzed. We still don't know the exact event that led to Kate going on the run. We still don't know exactly, ironically, we know pretty much how all the other characters got to Australia, but we're missing one. We don't know how Charlie got to Australia and what he was doing there, So there's still a little pieces of backstory that are missing from each of the characters. And we start to get that in this episode with Jack, where this episode shows how him and his future wife, Sarah, met ultimately, which was that she was brought in after being in a tragic car accident, with that had severely fractured her spine and was giving her very little chance of being able to walk again. Jack is, of course, it's ironic, too, that in this episode, the same guy who was telling him that he didn't have what it took, his father, Christian, who placed all this pressure on him growing up as a kid, And now the same guy is telling him, oh, you could have a little bit more better bedside manner. You could give people hope, which of course ties into Jack's thing of like being a little bit too rational. It's like you don't have to be all reality with people all the time. You could give them a little levity, which of course ties into what Hurley was saying when he was making a joke before on the island trying to cheer Jack up. Jack could be a little bit of a what's the term that I'm trying to remember from the Soprano? Looking a little blue in the face, if you will. So, what's it called? So that backstory is kind of in order to essentially inspire some hope, because it shows the story of how he ultimately was able to save Sarah's life, where she had a very, very little chance of being able to walk ever again. He promised her that he was going to fix her while she was on the operating table, because she said that she didn't mind if she was going to be able to wheel around at her wedding. He delivers the news to her fiance, portrayed by Anson Mount, Black Bolt from the Inhumans.
I thought he looked familiar.
Yep,
Like,
and
was
Multiverse
like,
of Madness. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep,
So,
and it shows
there's another actor, lesser known actor that pops up in Lost that I vaguely recall. We're gonna get to one in a bit.
There's another one from one of your Lost knockoff shows, but then it shows him running up and down the steps of the stadium after he's performed the surgery, and he runs into Desmond ultimately. This is gonna tie back in, portrayed by Henry Ian Cusick. So we've already seen Desmond, but only briefly. We didn't know who he was, and this is once again showing again. Everybody on the island is connected somehow, whether they realize it or not. Jack runs into Desmond. He tells him that, he tells him, obviously that he promised that he was going to help heal this woman, and then ultimately he was not able to uphold that promise. And Desmond is like, well, you gave her hope, didn't you? Or something along those lines. I don't remember exactly what he says, but Desmond essentially tells Jack that he's planning for a race around the world, essentially, in order to try and make it up to his daughter. So that's kind of our introduction to Desmond. A brief moment of like kind of giving Jack hope before he goes back in and talks to Sarah. And he unfortunately breaks the news to her that she'll never walk again. And Sarah's like, then why can I wiggle my toes? And it's kind of like one of those like brief, like, oh my God, like a miracle happened. Like Jack performed a miracle, but he can't explain how he did it, because by all scientific methods, she shouldn't have been able to walk again. So that's kind of one of those moments where you're like, oh, like, was there some magic going around, or is Jack just really that good? I don't know. What did you think of this flashback?
I didn't think even with my Lost conspiracy board that's behind me on the left. I didn't think that was island interference. That was just Jack did better than he thought he did, and it turned out just a little bit of help from. I'm not gonna say that. It's just sometimes that happens, because hear these things. You're never gonna walk again, and they start walking. So yeah, obviously we heard about this in last season's Jack's flashback episode,
Right.
but to actually fully see it happen it just adds a whole nother layer to it. It ties into Jack's place on the island, how he's trying to give them hope now after he tried to better his bedside manner in the past. So yeah, just even when you hear about an event, seeing it just adds a whole nother element to it.
It really does. It really, really does. And so, of course, that leads us back to the island. Jack descends down the hatch. He passes a brief part of the wall where his key is being magnetically drawn to it, a hint at the very strange electromagnetic energy that is going on in the hatch and around at other points on the island. He walks in. He sees kind of the central hub. He sees the very old-fashioned computer that Desmond was typing on in the opening scene. And, of course, Locke comes out and is like, I wouldn't do that, Jack. And then, of course, Jack is trying to get an explanation from Locke, being like, what the hell is going on down here? And then, of course, Desmond comes out holding the gun. And immediately you're like, what the hell is going on? Because, of course, your brain is trying to put together the piece of it. It's like, okay, Jack and Desmond know each other. They just don't realize it yet. What the hell is Desmond doing on the island? How did he get to the island? What was he doing in the hatch? And of course, and so of course it's that brilliant, like, connecting all the pieces together. And it's like you've been saying, Luke, one question answered, another 5 raised, and we are fully into season 2 now as far as figuring out, because again, so now we're establishing that not only do we have the survivors here, not only are the others on the island, even though they've only been vaguely hinted at, but now we're getting into the Dharma Initiative and starting to understand their role in the island's lore, as well as, how other people have been on the island throughout the island's history. That was only hinted at in season 1, and now we're getting Desmond is our first confirmation of that. Even though his name, I don't believe. Oh no, he does tell Jack his name in the flashback, so we do have his name. Desmond Hume, portrayed by Henry Ian Cusick, who appeared on one of your favorite Lost knockoff shows.
He did previously. He did the 100.
He was on the 100, right? Yeah, you're right. He was after Lost. Yeah. So we got our first entry. What was his character's name on the 100?
Kane.
Kane. Yeah. Well,
he's kind of a leader of the people, not the teens that went down, but of the people that stayed up and
got it.
Later went down.
Got it. So what?
Now that I'm remembering, like season 1 was also establishing everyone, and season 2 it's like an underground facility. Is that what?
Wow. So the 100 really just did not give a fuck about just blatantly ripping off Lost.
Yeah. Season 3 they're fighting AI, and then season 4 there's a nuclear fire coming. I don't know if that's another.
Well, I can promise you right now
indicator.
that's not what happens directly in Lost season 3 and 4. But who knows? There may be some more connections that we were not previously aware of. So, like I said, ends on a cliffhanger. Next week, Adrift. We're going to be covering what happened with the fallout with Michael, Jin, and Sawyer on the raft, and we're going to see what happens. And then, like I said, we still have to meet the tail end survivors as well. But like I said, already season 2 is shaping us up. Like I said, season 1 was the intro, and now season 2. This is where the show really begins. So very, very good premiere. Definitely one of my favorite episodes overall of Lost. This was an action-packed episode too. It started and it really did not stop until the very end. So yeah, all I can say is I am fully in, and I am ready to be back on the island. I assume you're very happy to be back on the island too after our little 2-week hiatus.
I'm very happy. This is a great catch-up episode. Like watching this when it came out would have been like, okay, like we're just catching everyone up from season 2. Even though it's like immediately after, you still gotta set the pieces, if you will, and then the next episode will obviously be a continuation of that with the team raft.
Right. That's the other thing too. Also, is that it is always impressive to me how, for the most part, this show was almost entirely in real time, and across 6 years, however many episodes they did, that's a tough act to follow. I think there's only like 1 or 2 time jumps, if that. But then, of course, once you get into the time travel later on, like it all gets topsy-turvy. But for the most part, the fact that the vast majority of this show does take place in real time has always been an impressive feat to me. Because if my memory serves, the only other show that was able to do that really well, particularly well, was Breaking Bad, where the fact that all 5 seasons of Breaking Bad take place pretty much in real time over the course of a year is absolutely insane to me. So with that being said, that's it. That is our debut for Talkin' Lost Season 2. Like I said, we are not stopping. We are going through every single episode of Seasons 2 and 3 for the rest of the year. We'll be reviewing some movies along the way. In fact, stay tuned. After this episode, I will be going over the 10th Best Picture nominee, I'm Still Here, the Brazilian movie, with a friend of mine as well. So we'll be going live right after that, so you guys will not want to miss that. But in the meantime, we're back on the island, Luke, and we are not leaving again, not for a very long time. I know.
Great place to be. There's always a new thing to find.
You would be one of those people where you would live on the island if you could. You would not want to be rescued, ultimately.
It'd be so much easier.
I know. I'm with you. Just no smartphones, no technology, no dealing with all the bullshit in society. Oh, it sounds like
send out cryptic signals with the old-timey computer.
Exactly. So with that being said, Luke, where can the good people follow you on the interwebs?
They can follow me at Luk Reviews on YouTube. I'm trying to be more consistent this year. There's a video about me speculating on the highest grossing movies of the year. And I'm already wrong, because apparently there's a Chinese movie that has almost made $2 billion.
People never account for those Chinese and Indian films that come out of nowhere.
Someone commented, I'm like, I think it's be this one. I'm like, what is this?
You're like, what is
the highest grossing movies? It's like 8th all time already.
Yep.
Like,
yep.
Like invalid video.
We are so drastically always underestimating the power of the Chinese box office ultimately, because there'll be like 8 movies that are like already the $1 billion range. You're like, where did these come from? We've never heard of any of these movies, and the Chinese are just kind of like laughing us. Oh man. Well, you guys can follow me with everything going on at Movie Nerd Reviews across all platforms, at Official Talkin' TV Podcast across all platforms. We'll be back next week with Adrift, and also to recap the Oscars afterwards. And 2 weeks after that, Luke, our boy Bong Joon-ho and Robert Pattinson, Mickey 17, will be back too, and we'll officially be kicking off kind of the real blockbuster season after kind of the disaster show that was Brave New World. But with that being said, people, you guys know where to follow me. I'll be back in a couple minutes. Anyways, get lost. We'll see you guys next week. All right, people, back-to-back podcast number 2. After we just wrapped our Talkin' Lost Season 2 premiere, I am here once again with another alumni, I don't know, pointed the right way, of the Neighborhood Playhouse, Daniel Mazzarolo. So, Daniel, you and I were talking a couple weeks ago, and you were mentioning how the Brazilian Best Picture nominee, I'm Still Here, you really, really wanted to cover it. It was the only one of the 10 Best Picture nominees that I still had yet to see, so I figure, well, what the hell, I may as well go and watch this. So I watched it yesterday, and oh man, do we have a lot to talk about, to say the least. What's it called? All that and more on today's episode of the Talkin' TV podcast, guys. Stay tuned. All right, guys, what's going on? Yes, that's right. We are actually reviewing a movie. I didn't think that we were going to be doing this so soon after the absolute disaster heap that was Captain America Brave New World last week, but we are here. The Oscars are only a week away. I am very, very excited because as this award season has proven, this past year of 2024 was an absolute mess. Some of the most absolutely baffling movies. The fact that a movie like Emilia Perez shot for the stars and then crashed so unbelievably hard in the funniest of ways possible. Like, in certain award ceremonies in the past, it's funny because I've talked about this in the past with really good movie years that have a really consistent awards. The award ceremony is really boring. Like, after a while, like last year, everybody knew that Oppenheimer was winning after a certain point. And there was just like, okay, there's no point in continuing to go through this because we know what's going to win. This time, however, it is all over the place. Anora seems to be the pretty favored front runner, if you will. But really, I would say the track record for this movie that we're about to talk about kind of started at the Golden Globes when this movie kind of comes out of nowhere. Fernanda Torres wins the Golden Globe for Best Actress. And all of a sudden, not only is this movie getting a ton of attention, but now you've also kind of got this big narrative going underneath it where this movie is kind of low-key become this low-key power player in the Oscar race. But Daniel, real quick before I go further into the Oscar buzz of it all, kind of when did you first hear about this movie and when did you become kind of familiar with it and kind of its, for lack of a word, its connection to, obviously, you know, Brazilian history, obviously?
That's great. So Dom, first I'd like to start for thanking you for having me here on your podcast. Of course. I'd like to say hello to all of our listeners and viewers. For those who don't know, I am Brazilian, so this is it's a great opportunity to talk about this movie here with you. So, you know, this movie, it's a very well-known story of Brazilian history, of course. It's based on a true story, and we can talk about it later if, you know, the conversation goes that way. Probably it will at some point. So we started, you know, hearing about this movie, you know, about it being shot. You know how just normally, you know, that movies are being shot, that movies are happening. But actually, I got to see it at the New York Film Festival in October last year. So that was before the premiere in Brazil. So it started getting a little buzz with the festivals. I know it went to Cannes. And a lot of people started talking about it. So the whole festival circuit was when really, you know, like with all of the red carpet events and with all of the interviews and all of that. And Brazil, I mean, Brazilian movies, we don't really get that much attention as I'm Still Here has gotten. So this is really a very new phenomenon for us Brazilians to have to have a film of ours be so well received and to be so much in the circuit like this, and to have one of our actresses, and Fernanda Torres is a very acclaimed actress in Brazil. She's very well loved by Brazilians. Funny enough, we can talk about this also. She's better known for being a comedic actress than for being a dramatic actress. And what she does in this movie is absolutely amazing. So we were all following that, and and then I got the chance to see it in New York at the New York Film Festival, and she was there, and Walter Salles, the director, was there, and the author of the book, which it's based on, Marcelo Rubens Paiva, was there also. So it was a great opportunity to see it with the Brazilian community in New York. There were 2 days of screening, and I went to watch it on the first day, and it was like we were at a Brazilian party. Like, all of the people I knew were there, all of our friends. It was really like a community thing. And I just like to mention, funny enough, you mentioned that the previous review you did was about Captain America. Is that what you said?
Brave New World. Unfortunately, yeah.
Okay, I haven't seen it, but
Just save your time and your money. Just don't bother.
Okay, I won't.
Don't bother.
But I would like to make a bridge that I'm Still Here is a superhero movie. Fernanda Torres, she refers to the character that she plays, Eunice Paiva, as a heroine in the sense of the Greek tragedy, the hero and heroines of Greek tragedies. We can also talk about this a little later, but I just wanted to make that joke that this is also somehow a superhero movie.
Well, honestly, after witnessing everything that she goes through in the movie, yeah, it's an apt comparison, to say the least. Because oh man, yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. Obviously, yeah, this was based off of the memoir that was written by her son, I believe it was. Correct me if I'm butchering the pronunciation, but Anda Estu Aqui is the name of it. And also, I believe he also wrote the sorry, I'm looking at a different thing there. Yeah, so it's based off the memoir from a very specific part of Brazilian history. The military dictatorship took place during the 70s, obviously, and basically what the movie does is it follows not Congressman Rubens Paiva, who was taken by the government and tortured and brutally murdered during this time period, but it follows his family, specifically his widow, who's left behind, Eunice Paiva, who was also taken and interrogated during this time period as well, and kind of the fallout and the ripple effects that it has specifically on the family after this tragic event occurs. And so right off the bat, in terms of its capturing of Brazilian history, I think probably the element that stuck out the most to me was the examination kind of the family unit, which is so funny because I feel like that's something that's become so taken for granted and so kind of ignored in obviously American culture and such, and kind of how that's become overlooked as far as being like the fortitude, the staple, if you will, of most people's, upbringings. And so how the movie was examining this through that lens, I think was just the absolute perfect way to capture that feel, really, of the time period, because you have the first half of the movie and it's very joyful, it's very exuberant. There's kind of, obviously they've established that, they're living through, kind of war times, but aside from the kids being stopped by the traffic stop at the beginning, what's so interesting is that it really is just kind of about them like celebrating and enjoying the time that they're able to spend with their loved ones before obviously kind of this harsh tragedy comes in that kind of pulls away Paiva, and then the rest of the family kind of follows as a result of it. So automatically off the bat, like, just what were your thoughts like kind of being familiar with this history and then seeing kind of how it's going to go throughout it and like knowing what's going to happen? Because the movie also does the thing that I love just in general that foreign films do, which is that the thing that I love most about foreign films that American films do not do is that foreign films always feel so kind of, they feel more lived in. They feel more real. They feel more like, oh, you're just following these people kind of in the day of their lives. And this happens, they're not like being set up with these grandiose, larger than life, over the top stakes that most American movies are. And yeah, I feel like that's obviously a thing that's missing in movies now, first and foremost. But also, it's a thing that it's always weird because I feel like the reason why I don't watch as many foreign films as I should is because every time I see this, I'm reminded, I'm like, oh, this is what movies should be. But it always kind of like ends up making it a little bit more special whenever I do watch it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, I'm a big supporter of foreign films. So, just the cultural background of different countries and nations and peoples, and how we learn about how you and I have learned in school about the importance of a point of view.
Yes.
And just having different perspectives that obviously, if you're from somewhere else, if you have a different background, you're going to have a different point of view. both, from the fictional point of view, but also from an aesthetic and formal point of view. So that's always interesting to just let yourself be contaminated by different points of view and just widen your artistic and aesthetic range. So I'm from Brazil, so for me, American movies are foreign to me.
Right.
And to you, a Brazilian movie is foreign, and European movies and Asian and African movies. But going to your point of just the family, I think, it's a very smart choice because there is this historical background of what's going on, and of course, us in Brazil, we're too aware of it because it's very, very recent. So the Brazilian dictatorship happened from 1964. That's when the coup happened, the military coup, and it lasted until 1985. So 21 years of a military dictatorship. I was born in 1987, so my generation is the generation right after the dictatorship, right after the re-democratization. And it certainly is a ghost to my generation, and certainly is a ghost to even the generation after mine. We did not have a healthy reestablishment of the democracy in Brazil. And so I don't want to get very historical about this.
No, please
but
keep
just a
talking.
little-
I'm interested in this. Keep going with this.
Okay. So just a little background of what happened. So you have countries like Argentina, for example, that after their dictatorship, there was a trial of the torturers, of the generals, of the commanders, and they were imprisoned, they were punished. In Brazil, we had an amnesty law. So all of the political exiled people who fought against the dictatorship were allowed back into the country, but also all of the generals, all of the torturers, all of the murderers gained amnesty for their crimes. So we didn't have that. So that's a stain in our past.
Right. Yeah, I saw that in the post credits of the movie as well, where they said that all the people who were put on trial for the torture, none of them. They
weren't. There wasn't a trial. That's the thing. They were never put on trial, which is worse.
Right. And I was like, oh man, that feels a little all too real right there.
Yeah, it's very terrible actually. So something that Fernanda Torres has been speaking about clearly in her interviews, which is what kind of allows me to say this here also, is that I think it's really interesting how she makes it a point to contextualize the Latin American military dictatorships as part of the Cold War, which usually they're not seen like that. So all of the military dictatorships in Latin America were sponsored by the United States, and a lot of Americans don't know that. So in the Cold War dispute of communism versus capitalism and left versus right, Latin America was a battleground for these ideological conflicts. And a lot of the countries were electing more left-oriented and maybe more socialist and communist leaders. That happened to Brazil. It was a president called Jango, and the United States intervened and sponsored the military coups so that in Latin America we would not be influenced by the communist and the left socialist ideologies from the USSR. So I like to point that out. I think it's something that should be known and studied. But so we have this very well-known background of what was the military dictatorship in Brazil, and he chooses. Walter Salles, of course, based off of the book of the son of Eunice Paiva, he tells a story through the lens of the family, which is an upper class family in Rio de Janeiro. I don't know if I say it in Portuguese or in English. I feel my parents would kill me if I say Rio de Janeiro.
Either or.
So Rio de Janeiro, it's how we say it in Portuguese. And what works very well is to really, so many people. So when I saw the film, we had a lot of American and non-Brazilian friends that were with us that we invited, or like someone's boyfriend or girlfriend, that's part of like our little group, our community. And to us, this is a story that we still talk about. It's a very, very heavy subject to our generation, and it's very sad. And for example, I studied with, I don't know, you know the character Veroca. She's the one who travels to Europe.
Yes, the oldest daughter.
She's driving the car and all of that.
Right, yes.
So her son, Chico, was in my class in high school. We're friends.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
You got a personal stake in this one.
I do have a personal stake, and we studied in high school together, and we were in the same class in our senior year, and we're friends. Why am I saying? And he's actually depicted in that last scene,
right?
When the whole family,
the whole big family's united, right? And where it's her
mom
too, also, yeah, Fernanda
Montenegro,
yeah,
we can talk about that.
Yeah, we'll get into that in a little bit.
And so he's portrayed by this actor who has a lot like curly hair. I don't know if you remember because it's a short scene and he has a few lines, but he's my friend in real life.
Okay.
So this is all very close to home. And just to show the real effect that such a criminal, a tragic, story has on a person, and how it really affects the lives of people. Because they're talking about the life of Eunice Paiva, but the dictatorship affected, directly about people that were murdered and tortured and kidnapped, hundreds and hundreds of people in Brazil. And then you have all of the indirect, of course, affected people by, just not having your rights and all of that. But it's a metonymy, you're talking about this family and you're really talking about all of the people that were affected by it. Everybody, again, just reiterating how close this is to my generation. All of us, a lot of us have people that we know or ourselves that come from families that have disappeared people and tortured people and murdered people, Our ex-president from Brazil, our only elected woman president ever, Dilma Rousseff from the Workers' Party, she was tortured in the Brazilian dictatorship. And she created a commission. She was elected in 2010, I think. And for the first time, so that was 15 years after the redemocracy, she instated a commission to study the effects of the dictatorship and to make a report of all of the tortures, all of the dead people, all of the tortured people, all of the disappeared people. So this was 15 years after that happened, Yeah. So to tell this, of course, this is also, we have to remember, this is not a documentary. This is a movie.
Right.
It's art. It's fiction.
Right.
Fiction. So Walter Salles, obviously, he makes artistic and aesthetic choices to make it interesting, to make it like followable, to make it poetic. And I think he is very successful in all of that. But just for us to be able to connect with that family and those kids and that wife and, that widow, and even Rubens Paiva when he's still alive. And sorry for the spoilers if anyone has not seen this movie.
Or if anybody hasn't studied Brazilian history.
Yeah. So yeah, I think it's a great way in to follow through the family's private life and through them to just be confronted with the horrors of what a military dictatorship can be. And again, if I'm talking about metonymies, this is talking about the Brazilian dictatorship, but it's talking about all of the Latin American dictatorships.
Right.
And it's talking about possibly what's going on in the United States right now. So it really is a warning sign of what you don't want to happen in your country, because this is what happens. It affects real people. It's a real thing that happens in real life and affects families and people and a whole society and a country.
As they say so many times, one of my favorite lines of all time from Game of Thrones: why is it that the commoners always suffer when the High Lords play their Game of Thrones? My follow-up question, just saying, my follow-up question to that. So the movie is obviously, again, despite the fact that it is about a very harsh and time period and subject matter, what's it called? How do you think with how they displayed it? Because obviously, again, we really only get brief showings of the torture. They're mostly in the background, but kind of how they use that rather as kind of this presence more so that's looming over kind of the family. And outside of that one brief sequence, really don't see a whole lot of awful sequences where you see the characters, getting tortured, obviously, but also how it's so, I'm trying to think of how to phrase this, how it's so deliberately placed within it, the sequence where she gets taken and where she's getting interrogated and kind of how they're wearing her down and showing the tactics that they utilize. Obviously, what were your thoughts on that whole process of the film?
I think it really is to create the atmosphere, right? So, I think it's so sad that her 15-year-old daughter is brought in to torture
Right.
also, right?
Yeah.
I think her name is it Elena?
I've got it right here. It's the kids' names are, so we have Marcelo, who's the youngest. Vera, yeah, Eliana is the one that was.
Oh,
brought in.
Eliana, sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, so Eliana is brought in and she's like 15 years old and she's
Right.
there for 24 hours. And a recent interview with her came out that she was actually sexually assaulted. And that's something that she had never spoken about loudly because
Right.
she didn't want her mother to know. So after her mother passed away, when did Eunice Paiva pass away? Was it 2014 or something like that?
It was 20. It was 4 years after the final season, so 2018 was when she passed away.
Okay, so ever since 2018, so that's like 7 years ago, Eliana has come out and say that some of the military commanders there touched her inappropriately.
I had a bad feeling that happened.
Yeah, and that's really disgusting. And a lot of things happened in the basements of the military dictatorship. You know, there was a thing called paujarada, where people were held upside down and beaten. People got shocked on their private parts. Women had rats and cockroaches put in their private parts. There's a story of a very well-known journalist in Brazil. She was left naked in a room with a snake, and the lights were turned off. You know, so this kind of torture. Very heavy stuff and much worse things than that. So, you know, I think that Walter Salles not wanting to make anything explicit about this is a choice to keep the focus of the movie where he wants, which I think is the heroine Eunice Paiva. But also that panoptical atmosphere that he creates, even when they're still at the house, of just which is kind of how I imagine it was like, that just being watched all the time. And, you know, you have this in all of authoritarian and totalitarian regimes, of feeling that you're being watched in your own house. And there's a play by Brecht. I don't know if you've ever read it. It's called Horror and Misery in the Third Reich or something like that.
I've heard of it. I've never read it, but I've heard of it.
I'm translating from Portuguese, so maybe the name is a little different than that. But there's a scene, it's called The Spy. It's about a couple and they have a kid. And the kids back then in like with the Hitler Youth and all, they were incentivized in school to spy on their parents and denounce if they heard anything like communisty or lefty.
Right.
So it's a scene about a kid that goes out to buy candy and the parents flip. And they're like, where the fuck did he go? Did he go to tell on us or something like that? Right. So I think there's this atmosphere of you. So what he portrays, and he wants, of course, this is my reading of it, is that general atmosphere of you not being able to do whatever you want in your own house and feeling that you're being watched in your own house. And then they go effectively to I don't know how to say this in English, but the place where the tortures happened and the institutionalized dictatorship office there, where, you know, again, she spends like 2 weeks or something, and
12 days, something like that.
12 days, and just the overall feeling of you being watched and spied on and not have just not being free, not having your liberty of thinking, of saying, and when that applies to your own home, just how you know what torture that is, that when it comes to your safe and private space, you're not even granted that.
The worst kind of torture I often find is more psychological than physical, even with all the disgusting physical things that people were subjected to during that time period. And going back to the family, I mean, you see it obviously, like once they come home, like nothing is the same for them. Nothing. The kids have kind of they've lost that sense of innocence, that, you know, that sense of fun, that joy that they had for the first half. It's completely gone, and it's
so
kind
sad,
of like and that kind of really is what affected me by it. And obviously, again, you know, she's going to all the family friends and starts seeing what they could do. First, trying to find the husband, and then obviously when she first hears that, you know, the husband, they're like, he's gone, he's dead, and when she makes that choice to deliberately not tell the kids too, where she's like, okay, like I have to maintain that sense of what's called
stoicism,
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I have to do that, for them, obviously, because if they're going to have any chance, if we're going to have any chance of making it out of this, someone has to remain strong. And kind of the film's emphasis on kind of the power of the maternal role, obviously, and kind of what that means in all of its different ways, shapes, and forms, and how it's not always cookie cutter, and really honestly how she steps up and really takes over after her husband's death. It's commendable, to say the least, how she realizes that, like, look, at the end of the day, like, we can't stay here ultimately. So she makes the decision to move them to Sao Paulo, where she's going to go back to school to become a lawyer and such. And how,
and that's where I'm from.
Yeah, there you go. So that's another kind of what's it called, way that it connects close to you. And then after they leave, obviously the film does 2 time jumps in order to kind of wrap the story, right? 1 to 95, when she finally receives the husband's official death certificate. I was thrown off, obviously, because of course, you see the older kids, so you're trying to figure out, who they are. And then I didn't realize that her son was in an accident that left him as a paraplegic. So
he jumped in an empty pool. It's a very tragic story.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, so she receives the official death certificate. And then there's one more time jump to 2014 when she is much older. It's the actress who portrays her mom, Fernanda Montenegro, is there. You have all the kids there taking the picture, and she's watching, and even though she's got advanced Alzheimer's, she's watching footage of, of all the people who were disappeared, as they're talking about the after effects of the dictatorship, and you see the image of her husband, and there's something that, like, almost awakens in her, and I love the filmmaking choice that Walter Salles makes in order to have the camera be her POV and see the footage from her POV. So it's almost like putting you in her shoes, and like almost like making you, the audience, like aware of what she's feeling after seeing kind of everything. For the most part, everything is third person, from an outside perspective, kind of looking in. And then now all of a sudden you're like, no, you are her. You're seeing kind of what she went through, and it ties into the meaning of the film. I'm still here, in the sense of where, the rest of the world may have moved on, but, like, obviously, as you were saying, the people who went through it, it's like, yeah, they are still there, and they are still remembering, and they are still kind of reminding the world and its citizens of, this very bleak period in the country's past, because, as has been said numerous times, those who do not know their history are doomed to repeat it, and such, as we're kind of seeing right now, as far as how the direction that the world is going in ultimately. So, kind of couple other stats that I wanted to pull up. Obviously, again, famously, Fernanda Torres' mother, who appears in the movie, Fernanda Montenegro, was previously, and you'll have to correct me on this if I get this wrong, but was previously the only Brazilian actress nominated for Best Actress back in 1998, I want to say, for the movie Central Station. So that makes her the first Brazilian actress in 26 years to be nominated. Like I said, kind of has come out of nowhere after the Golden Globe win. She got the 5th spot, competing against, of course, Mikey Madison, Demi Moore, Carlos Sofia Gascon, and Cynthia Erivo. And honestly, I gotta say, I think she's gonna win. I do. I'm putting it out there. And I'm not just saying that, obviously, because I love the movie. I really, really did. It's just, and the type of performance, it's so different than all the other 4 performances, which are, for the most part, very flashy and very over the top kind of a way, where this is so understated. It's so subtle. You get everything that you need from her facial expression. And again, it's the kind of the fortitude through strength, despite the fact that she is literally, her life is falling apart. This entire life that she's come, that they've built here in this house, it's kind of all gone. It's ripped away from them. And how she's able to kind of maintain her strength throughout it, and how understated that is. But also, again, just kind of the testament to that kind of never giving up, never willing to kind of let the bad guys win, essentially, if you will. That, to me, is why. And also, again, if we're just getting into it from a voting standpoint, I think that ultimately, because Mikey Madison and Demi Moore, who previously were the front runners, I think that they're ultimately going to split votes, not to mention the fact that the voting body for the Academy Award has become a lot bigger and a lot more international based. It's why you've seen a lot more of an inclusion of international films in the last couple of years. Drive My Car in 2021. What's it called? Last year, obviously, Parasite, obviously, that's kind of where it all started, finally winning. Zone of Interest and Past Lives last year as well. So you've been still a Triangle of Sadness in 2022. So you've been seeing more of an inclusion of more international films, not only kind of in like the smaller categories, which they were kind of relegated to previously by the Academy, but now obviously making it into the Best Picture race. Previously you saw efforts like Old Boy, like City of God, like what's the other one that I'm thinking of from '02 that I'm drawing a blank on? Like Amelie, you would see like occasionally, like you would see foreign film inserts, but I would say now more so they are finally getting the examination and the justice search that they do that they deserve. And honestly, compared to something like Amelia Perez, which is once again just the less said about that movie, the better. But what's it called? But it is very what's it called? It is very rewarding, I would say, to people who like are more of a fan of film outside of the typical American media machine, if you will, kind of getting some awards recognition like this. It's nice when it happens, and also when you get to consider this along the likes of like Dune 2, Wicked, The Brutalist, The Substance, Complete Unknown, these kind of bigger, larger than life feelings. And when you see what I guess could quote unquote be considered a little movie, even though I wouldn't consider this a little movie in any stretch of the imagination, kind of being honored among them, it's really cool, at least for my perspective.
Certainly a dark horse, maybe.
Oh yeah, definitely, because nobody saw this one coming for Best Picture. Like we were all pretty convinced that she was going to get nominated, but this getting nominated for Best Picture is kind of the surprise, because we were all predicting it was going to be like, oh, it's going to be September 5, or it's going to be Real Pain, or it's going to be Sing Sing. But this getting in there, it was a surprise, but a welcome one, to say the least.
Yeah, it was very surprising. I really, I have some hopes up for Best Foreign Film.
Oh, definitely. Definitely.
I do have hopes up for Best Actress, even though, even Fernanda Torres says, a film all spoken in Portuguese. Let's just keep our
expectations
tempered, but she really does a phenomenal job, and I really think it can come to us. We were talking about it. I mean, I really think, and I think you agree with me, that now it's down to 3 actresses, right? Mikey Madison, Demi Moore, and Fernanda Torres.
Absolutely.
The fact that she won the Golden Globe, I mean, she wasn't even nominated for the BAFTA, so that kind of, levels it out a little bit. But I have our hopes up. We're going to throw a little viewing party, and we're going to celebrate, hopefully. But what I wanted to say is how incredible it is that, the Golden Globe win, that really put it on the map.
Yeah.
And then for this movie to have been nominated for Best Picture really makes people go out and watch it, because there are so many people, and I'm not just talking about like the Academy Award, what do you call it? Like judges,
the voting body.
The voting people. You have like those everyday people around the world who just want to watch all of the Oscar movies, and now they're going to watch I'm Still Here, and they're going to learn a little bit about Brazilian cinema. They're going to learn a little bit about Brazilian history. One thing that I want to point out, Dom, that I think is really cool, just the effects of art, is that talking about this family specifically. So Rubens Paiva was a very important congressman, of course, back in like the 60s, 60s, I think. And today in the Brazilian Congress, there's a statue of him. And Bolsonaro, which is our previous far-right president, he spat at the statue of Rubens Paiva.
Of course he did.
And now this movie, is nominated for a Best Picture. Something else that I wanted just to say, just historically, is how a lot of the people that were tortured and murdered in the dictatorship had their death certificate as suicide. And that's such a beautiful scene when in, I think it's 95, under the presidency of Fernando Henrique Cardoso, the state acknowledges the responsibility that, changes his death certificate. And even more recently, I think it was this year, again, his death certificate was changed to the state acknowledging that he was murdered by the Brazilian state.
Right. Which I assume must be like just so gratifying as well, to finally see like the state like take accountability for the previous regime's actions.
And the craziest thing now is that the Supreme Court just ruled that they're having a vote this week, they had, about reopening his case to maybe finally judge the torturers and the commanders. So
are they still alive, the commanders and torturers who did it?
I know I don't know specifically if his are, but there are some that
Okay.
still are.
I had assumed there would be.
Some, some of course have died. But what are we talking about? 30 years after the redemocratization of Brazil, the Supreme Court is reviewing the amnesty law to see if they're going to punish the people who tortured and murdered and disappeared with people. And I think the success of the movie has a lot to do with this, that so many people are watching it, so many people are affected by it, so many people are just saddened, and they feel horrible about what happened, and people seeing this all over the world, and it is a little embarrassing, I mean, I'm sure you guys feel, when Trump says something stupid, you feel embarrassed. You're
Don't
like,
even
God,
get me
so
started. That was all of college that I had to deal with that with the first term.
Yeah. So to us, it's a little embarrassing that these people are free to walk and live normal lives. So so just the effects, like the immediate effects that an exquisite piece of art can have, and we're reviewing 30-year-old laws in Brazil because of it.
Yeah, but that's good, honestly. If anything else, they say that, justice is blind and takes time, but art can, sometimes speed up the process, hopefully.
Yeah, it can be a catalyst.
Exactly. I can't think of any immediate other examples off the top of my head, but I know that there have been before. So, yeah. Yeah, like we were both been saying, just the fact that the movie could have such an immediate impact like that as well, both kind of within the art world, but also having real world implications as well. And like you were saying, the fact that as a direct result of this getting the Best Picture nomination, now there's going to be people who are going to see it who never would have even known about a movie like this beforehand. It's funny because people have asked me in the past, oh, why did you watch the Grammys, but you still watch the Oscars? Nobody gives a shit about the Oscars. And I'm like, because while that's true to a certain extent, right, I guess you could say mainstream people don't care about the Oscars the way that they used to. The Oscars still can prop up movies like this that otherwise would have never gotten any sort of mainstream recognition like this before. That's the purpose that they still serve, is the fact that people are going to go out and see a movie like I'm Still Here. If you want to go last year, they're going to go out and see a movie like The Zone of Interest, and so on and so forth. The fact that because directly as a result of the Best Picture nomination, regardless of whether it wins or not, people are going to go out and watch it that would have never even heard of it, that never would have even thought to look at it. People who are not in one of the big metropolitan areas on either coast that wouldn't maybe necessarily have access even to watching a movie like this. That's kind of the power of it. And that's kind of always, to me, been what separates the Oscars and from the other award ceremonies, because the Grammys, like, come on, everybody in the industry even knows that they're a joke. They're basically like using that just as a show. They're like, yeah, it's not about the awards ultimately at the end of the day. The awards don't mean shit. The Oscars do still have some impact in that sense,
But isn't it crazy to think like how many I'm Still Here's are in the world?
Oh, hundreds.
And
over
that
hundreds
don't have the money to make it, to these high places, and we're missing out on so many good movies from countries that maybe we've never seen anything from.
Yes.
Because of financial disparities and just reputations and stuff.
And let's
like
be
that.
honest, politics as well.
Of course, yeah. Politics.
Yes, always that dreaded P word. But that's why we have to champion movies like this when they do come around, because they don't get the record, because they are around a lot, but they don't always get the recognition that they deserve. So that's kind of why I titled this surprise nominee, but in the best sense of the word. I'm like, yes, these are the surprises that we want. Obviously, yes, we wish that, they would only ever nominate movies like this, but unfortunately that is not the world that we live in. So yeah, like I said, yes.
Sorry, it's just we were talking a little bit. We mentioned the last scene, right? Of the I'm Still Here.
Yes.
So if it's okay with you, I'd just like to mention, of course, about Fernanda Montenegro.
Oh, please do. Please do. Like I said, we talked about her before, where she was the only Brazilian actress nominated 26 years ago for Central Station.
Yeah. Yep. So for those who don't know, Fernanda Montenegro is Fernanda Torres' real mother in real life. And Fernanda Torres, she actually told us when she was here for the New York Film Festival that we had the talk back that I mentioned, that someone came up to her and said something like, "Wow, your makeup was so good in the last scene. I couldn't believe it."
I was wondering how many people were gonna think that was
Yeah.
purple with old age makeup.
Yeah. So Fernanda Montenegro is the best actress of Brazil. She is considered the dame of theater, the dame of movies. She's just really. She calls herself. She says she's like the theater working class. Like she just works
Yeah.
and works and works and works. And she has done like some revolutionary stuff way decades ago, and she's still doing things. Those little like 5 minutes that she's on screen for "I'm Still Here" are devastating, are beautiful. And what's really fun, and I know you know this, but I think it's just worth a mention that she's collaborated with Walter Salles, the director, in Central Station, like you mentioned. So Walter Salles is one. I mean, Brazil has very few times been in the Oscars nominated for anything, and we have never won an Oscar at all for any category. Anybody like from Brazil. I know that there's a Brazilian person who won like best costume, but she was like a European citizen and grew up in Europe. So
so I don't know if that counts.
Yeah, I don't know if that counts, but so Walter Salles, funny enough, has never been nominated for Best Director.
Right.
So we've had Best Director for, I think it's
Fernando Meirelles, I know, was nominated for City of God.
Fernando Meirelles was nominated for City of God, and I think Hector Babenco was nominated for The Kiss of the Spider Woman.
Yes, he was in '85.
In the '80s, yeah, for Best Director.
Yes.
And Best Picture, it's the first time. And Best for International Film, we've had like 5 more or less, I think.
Right.
And Central Station was the last one before "I'm Still Here," and that was Walter Salles. So
as well,
that really is a testament to his qualities, as an artist, as a director. That 26 years after the last time any Brazilian was nominated for an Oscar, it's him again. It's his movie again, and it's the daughter of the actress that was nominated. Now, a funny story, Dom, is that Fernanda Montenegro was nominated for Central Station,
right?
And she lost to Gwyneth Paltrow.
The infamous Weinstein takeover year that kind of influenced where the Oscars were going to go. And if you ask me, ruined the Oscars for a long time. Trust me, I literally just read Oscar Wars by Michael Schulman, which broke down that entire process of how that happened. And it is fascinating, to say the least.
And Gwyneth Paltrow won for Shakespeare in Love. And it's just funny to say, of course this is a joke, but Gwyneth Paltrow is not very well liked in Brazil.
I can imagine. If it makes you feel better, she's not very well liked most places, I feel.
Yeah. So she stole the Oscar from Fernanda Montenegro. And Brazilians, of course, internet wasn't a thing back then, like social media and stuff. Brazilians have a huge, huge social media presence. With the Golden Globes, all of Fernanda Torres, like pictures and reels and cuts and stuff like that had like 2 million likes and comments, and then the one following had like 600,000. It was like much less because we're very strong presence. It's a cultural thing.
Man, Brazilians show up to support their own.
We show up. Yeah, we show up. But I just wanted to point out and just the whole Central Station moment in the Oscars 26 years ago, and it's a movie I highly recommend.
Right.
And also, Fernanda Torres had collaborated with Walter Salles in a film called Foreign Land, I think, in
1995. I'm seeing right here.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Foreign Land, 95. And they won, I think she won an award at the Cannes Film Festival for this film. Maybe she won a Best Actress award for this film. But it received a lot of acclaim also. I also recommend watching it. And Walter Salles directed the Diaries of a Motorcycle.
Yes, Motorcycle Diaries. Yes.
Motorcycle Diaries.
Which I'm seeing here was nominated for a screenplay nomination in 2004, but that was it.
Okay. With, of course, the story of Che Guevara, with Gael Garcia Bernal, which is a very important, I think he's a Mexican actor.
Yes.
He's collaborated with Pedro Almodovar.
Alfonso Cuarón.
Alfonso Cuarón, and Walter Salles also directed On the Road, on the Kerouac's movie, which
Yes.
I think it stars Kirsten Stewart and Garrett
Yep.
Hedlund.
Yep.
I don't remember who else. I watched it.
Amy
in the
Adams
movies. It's
is
a
in it.
really,
Elizabeth Moss, Kirsten Dunst, Viggo Mortensen. Holy shit! Wow, that's a lot of people in that.
yeah, him. So and he did a horror movie also. So he's definitely one of those Brazilians who's kind of like also has a little international career happening. Brazilians are we're getting there.
I can see that. I can see that. You guys are moving up in the world. Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen. We just recently had Bruna Marquezine was in Blue Beetle, the DC movie.
Yes, I did. I did see that. I remember everybody was making a big deal when that happened 2 years ago.
She was
that
was
my birthday
lead
movie actually 2 years ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I was that was my 26th birthday.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
So obviously as a Brazilian, it makes me very happy to see that we're a lot of great Brazilian actors are getting international recognition. And even Celton Mello, who plays Rubens Paiva in the movie, who a lot of people, of course, Fernanda Torres is the great lead, and she's magnificent. But his performance, he's a great actor in Brazil. He has done some of the most important movies of like the last 2 decades. And because of this movie now, I saw that he was doing a movie, I think, with Paul Rudd or Jack Black, so now he's also thancfully being recognized internationally and being cast in American and international movies. I don't know if you're looking it up. His name is Celton Mello.
Yeah, Celton Mello. I'm looking at it. I'm literally looking at it right now. You read my mind. Oh my god. Oh, you're gonna laugh. It's so funny. As soon as you said Jack Black and Paul Rudd, I knew exactly what movie you were talking about, but I had to confirm it. So they're doing a remake of Anaconda from the 90s that Jack Black and Paul Rudd are going to be in, along with Fanny Newton, Danielle Melchior, Steve Zahn. And I think Celton Mello, if I'm not mistaken, I believe is going to be the John Voight part from the original, where he's the guy that's like, oh man.
So that's so cool.
Yeah, he's definitely making it. Yeah.
Yeah, and Fernanda Torres also, I'm sure, is going to get a lot of opportunities.
Yep.
And I hope it opens a little bit, the market for Latin American movies and actors and artists in general. A lot of people forget Brazil is part of Latin America, but it is.
Yep. Yeah, and I just also wanted to say that from a box office standpoint as well. So the movie right now is grossing the U.S. $26.4 million on an $8 million budget. So that's already a huge win right there. And I'm expecting those numbers to go up in the next couple of weeks, especially like if this movie, well, like I said, if the movie wins Best Actress, I definitely think that it's going to go up from there as well. So that's kind of like my prediction.
My bets would be a best foreign film.
Yeah.
Best actress, I really hope so.
It would be cool, but it's very, very close between those three right now.
Yeah, it's really, really close. It's what you said. This is an exciting Oscar because
it's an exciting Oscar year.
We don't really know, like Mikey Madison won the BAFTA, and then Demi Moore has won so much stuff, and Fernanda Torres won the Golden Globe, and it's just like
you really don't know who it's gonna be. Yeah. And even with picture, I'm like, we're only a week away from the Oscars. I still don't know who's gonna win Best Picture. This is the most like clueless that I've been probably since. Oh my God, when was the last time? Probably since 2019, honestly, was the last time where I didn't know who was going to be the Best Picture winner. Because the last 4 years, I'm like, last year everybody knew it was Oppenheimer. The year before, everybody knew it was Everything Everywhere. In the COVID year, the 2 COVID years, like Coda kind of had this momentum, so it kind of won at the last minute. And then Nomadland was like kind of the darling favorite, even though like most of those movies people didn't even get a chance to see because of COVID. So yeah, it was probably 2019 was the last time where Parasite kind of ended up becoming the sneaky winner when everybody thought it was going to be Once Upon a Time in Hollywood or 1917. So
yeah, and it snatched the 2 awards, right? It won Best Foreign Film and Best Picture.
Yeah.
Well, let's see what's going to happen. So I'm humble. If we take one statue out of the 3, it's already going to be a great reason to celebrate.
Yeah, definitely.
But if we take 2, woo.
Oh man, it's going to be Carnival 2.0. That's all I'm going to say.
And what's funny is that that's the Carnival weekend in Brazil. So people are going to
Really?
be partying, and
Oh, so
and
people are already going to be partying. Oh my
yeah.
God. Wow. Oh man, it's funny too because I was trying. Obviously I'd very much like to go to Carnival at some point. I've never been, but I was gonna try and go this year. But it looks like I've seen the videos. I'm like, oh man, I gotta get down there. That looks like my kind of a party. Well, Daniel, thank you so much for coming on. This is an absolute blast. I could talk for another 3 hours, honestly. But unfortunately, I don't think any of us have that time. Unfortunately, being living in New York City the way that we do. But this is a lot of fun. Honestly, I'm really glad it gave me a lot of perspective on this movie that I didn't have otherwise. Let's call it. So as I end every show with, where can the good people follow you on social medias? Anything that you might want to plug? Any upcoming projects that you might have coming out?
Cool. Well, Dom, thank you so much for having me. It really was a pleasure to be able to talk about this movie, and I'm glad that it gave you new perspectives. There's so much little things, just historical, cultural backgrounds, and I'm really happy that I could contribute to that. My Instagram is at Mazzadan, so that's Mazzadan. I do have a few stage performances coming up this semester, so I'll be posting that on my social media. So if anyone's interested, and maybe if you're interested in some Brazilian playwrights that will be coming to New York also, translated to English, of course, follow me on social media and come watch. And I'll let you know, Dom, of course.
Yes,
I'll send you a personal invitation.
Yes, please do. I'd love to come to them. And of course, you guys know where to follow me. Everything going on at Movie Nerd Reviews across all platforms, at Official Talkin' TV Podcast across all platforms. This episode will be available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts tomorrow. Subscribe if you watched on YouTube. Follow us on Twitch. And as always, people, you guys know how I end this every show. 12 Seasons short film, and watch more fucking movies. We'll see you guys next week.